Welcome everybody. Welcome to the third installment of our ASCS Practice Management webinar series. Thank you all for joining us. And again, this will be recorded and uploaded to the ASCS link and the website. So a bit of a shout out to enjoy that content as much as you can when it becomes uploaded. So we've got a really interesting webinar for us tonight. We're going to start off with a brief kind of video from our sponsors, and then we'll get into it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ASCS Foundation webinar series. I'm Scott Gunn, Vice President of Shoulder Marketing and Sales at Smith & Nephew. As the sole sponsors of this series, we're thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce you to Smith & Nephew and our innovative product portfolio. For over 100 years, Smith & Nephew has been at the forefront of medical technology, committed to improving lives through our pioneering solutions. We're excited to share our latest advancements in shoulder arthroplasty and sports medicine. Our team of experts have been focused on providing you options throughout your patient's continuum of care with cutting-edge products like Regeniten, a bioinductive implant that redefines biologic healing for rotator cuff tendon growth, and the elegant ATOS shoulder system, which embodies stability, simplicity, and flexibility. ATOS is a streamlined system for both anatomic and reverse procedures, allowing for an elevated operating room experience. Throughout this webinar series, you'll hear from leading experts in the field who will discuss the latest research, clinical evidence, and best practices in shoulder and elbow medicine. Thank you for joining today, and we look forward to sharing our passion for innovation and helping you provide the best possible care for your patients.
Right. So again, thank you to Smith & Nephew for helping sponsor this. So we have a really interesting webinar for us today. So myself and Dr. Sperling will help moderate. We have some panelists who probably need no introduction. We have Vani Sivasan, Joseph Aboud, Bill Levine, and then Joaquin Sanchez-Sotelo. And what we're going to focus on for the next hour or so is really how we can use digital platforms, social media, to understand how we can use it to help brand ourselves, connect with patients, our colleagues, and then also how we can use it to connect with others as a mentorship tool and a leadership tool. So what we'll do is we have everyone kind of here has a brief talk. So what we'll have is a brief presentation from each panelist and then interject with a bit of a Q&A between each of those talks. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as best we can. And then at the end of everyone's presentations, we'll kind of have an open Q&A for any remaining questions. So thanks again. Looking forward to it. And Vani, if you want to get started, please.
All right, guys. So I'm starting off with social media for patients. And hopefully you're going to learn a lot today. I specifically know that I did just with some of these statistics. So here we go. 72% of the United States adults actively use social media. So why do you care? Well, because 1 in 3 patients say posts influence the choice of their physician. Patients are using social media platforms for surgeons to seek information, to share experiences, and it directly impacts how they view you, how they see you. So your digital presence is your referral network. It matters. So where do patients go? Where do they look? Well, the traditional places like Facebook is still alive and well in an older population. Younger generations might use Instagram or TikTok. What's interesting is the growing media presence and sort of informational presence of YouTube for both surgical videos, information, post-op recovery, and rehab. So where are the opportunities for us as surgeons? Well, I think it's really to provide patient education. I'm going to give you some statistics here, some real values of why that matters. And it's a huge opportunity, I think, for us as shoulder surgeons to provide visual education, to connect with our patients, and also to just be relatable. You'll find a lot of the big media stars and social media are very relatable. They're approachable to people and practice growth. So where are we today? Well, rotator cuff, for example, it's the patients are already looking online, but what they find isn't good enough. So websites, 49 rotator cuff dedicated websites exist. But there was a study that looked at this and only 2 met readability and 14 were understandable and 0 met accountability. So what kind of sources are we doing? What kind of information are we providing? YouTube did this, and there was 50 YouTube rotator cuff videos that had 15.9 million viewers. But unfortunately, they were low reliability and poor educational quality. Of course, we can't leave without saying Google. Google, 90% of patients search Google. There were 19.8 million results shown. And the bottom line is there's a huge amount of data, but it's low quality, low content. And we as surgeons have an opportunity and responsibility to fill this gap. So what about arthroplasty, right? We're shoulder surgeons. What about shoulder replacements? Well, again, there are few patient-facing websites that have readability and reliability. Only 7% of these really met what you'd consider a seal of index for the right educational value for our patients. And YouTube, our top shoulder replacement videos have thousands of views, but overall they're a low reliability, poor educational quality, and don't meet the criteria that we talk about being really good sources of data for the level that patients need. Again, 90% of patients search on Google. We start with Google for shoulder replacements. Shoulder arthroplasty has 13 million views, and shoulder replacement surgery, 142 million results. So what's the takeaway? Social media presence, it matters. Not only does it matter for patients just for informational value, but it's also your reputation. We use social media, and patients do, to sort of look you up. They find out whether it boosts you, whether your webinar, whether your health grades, your vitals, all the ratings that you have, they're all based on social media values now, and it influences it directly. What we found, we looked at this in a study, and Twitter and Facebook seem to significantly impact your health grades, your vital scores, and these are things that patients really truly use. So what should we think about? What do we need to avoid and be concerned about? There's never post patient identifiers, right? HIPAA compliance is critical. We got to stay professional. Even your personal websites, your personal Instagram pages, these things, patients can see these things if they're public facing. There's no regulation or oversight. There's information, and there's a ton of misinformation out there that I already talked about. So patients already arrived, they're using it. So maybe we need to provide these better value for their money content. What about best practices? The Academy has a bunch of them. They talk about the use of social media as a communication tool, as education, but as a professionalism, but also sort of following the guidelines with your own institution. So I wanted to provide some critical information. Here are the top 10 influencers in surgery on some of these social medias. Most of these people have millions of viewers. And when you look at it, these doctors all in general, I try to summarize it for you guys of where could we go with this? Well, what sells is funny, relatability with some education in there. People really want to learn about you. They want to see you in action. Who sells it? Well, derm and plastics. The top 10 surgical influencers are all derm and plastics. So they're really doing it well. Where could we go with this? Well, these are our top 10 orthopedic or top 5 orthopedic creators. And what you find is there's so much room for growth for us to connect with patients. Musculoskeletal health is 1 in 3 visits. So it matters to patients, and we need to get out there and provide good quality data. Patients want us to be relatable. They want us to be funny and to educate. So patients' perspective, 57% use social media for health info, and 29% that could say that it could influence who they choose, where they choose, what surgery they get. So patients use social media, they trust it, it provides them educational. So the key to success is for us to be educational, not prescriptive, to protect our patients' privacy of all, to engage authentically, to be real people, but to tailor your platform and your content accordingly. Take-home message, social media is here to stay, whether you like it or not. It's a tool. We can use it. We can build our reputation. We can build our quality of education, and we can use it, or you can lose your patients to your competition.
Thanks, Bonnie. That was great. That was really helpful. So I think, my questions for you to start is, the obvious concern that some people have is saying, hey, I'm getting into practice. So for a young surgeon, right? I'm getting into practice. I want to utilize social media. But what is your advice on saying, I want to utilize social media, but I don't want to overstep. I want to be involved. I want to show people who I am, but I'm concerned about how people may perceive me being, well, more than I actually am. So this concept of saying, pushing yourself more forward than you actually have earned the right to do.
Well, I think you've earned the right? Remind yourself you've done medical school, you've done 5 years of residency, you've done a fellowship typically, And I think branding is everything, right? We talked about this, like Hafiz, about young surgeons, and they want to brand themselves, right? They want to distinguish their quality and their what they've practiced. And I think it's critical, right? Nowadays, people don't know how hard it is to get where we are and the quality and the importance of that. And so I think what I showed you is that right now they're Googling anything. So it's important that we as young surgeons provide a relatable content for people. So I always tell people, it's like what you believe in, what you learned. Give a little piece of that to our audience, to the patients. And I think that they really, really value that. I think the other real quick thing I would say is being relatable for young surgeons. I think it's okay to have a tough day, right? Obviously you don't want to show these disastrous things, but I think showing a little bit of content of who you are in combination with education is critical.
Joaquin.
Yeah, great presentation, Bunny. I think that many of our younger surgeons are wondering what Hasif just said, which is how can I use social media to grow my practice, which is your point. And then I have two very quick questions for you. One, do you know of any good analytic tool that can let you know if that's happening? And the second, is it worth for younger surgeons to pay for a social media agent? Is that going to give you a return on investment, meaning that you will get more patients and then either break even or actually be financially successful by paying someone to do it for you?
Well, there's a couple studies out there that talk about this. There's actually a couple surgeons that have done and got Google reviews. So they made a concerted effort for a year of practice, and they did and really went out to patients and got Google reviews, and then looked at their number of referrals and their practice volume, and it was significantly influenced by that. So I would tell you, absolutely, I think it's a critical. I think the point is when you start to look at this nowadays with AI, some of the analytic tools we used to use, the ways that these Google algorithms and search engines used to do, have sort of been up changed. So there's a little bit of upheaval in the market in that. So now with AI tools, I think that, but providing quality content, Joaquin, I think is a really easy way to connect with patients. They want to know rehab recovery things. They want to watch the surgery. We're doing a study right now and asking patients to rate videos, and they love it. So if you can personalize it in a way that provides something to a patient, I think it's a critical tool. And if you don't have the time, I think there's so many young people that are able to help us do this in a much more nimble way. I personally think it's well worth the investment. I think some marketing agents would really talk about that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think just like doctors aren't all the same, social media agents and social media creators
absolutely
are not all the same. So I think the concern with hiring somebody is that it may appear and feel to the viewers inorganic. And if it appeals, I think I would argue that if it appears inorganic and appears inauthentic, that's not going to work. So I think being careful with who you engage with, making sure that this is content created to you, it's not boilerplate stuff that they just post for you, is probably a good idea.
And then I'd add another point too. It's also what you post, right? If you want to treat a lot of rotator cuff pathology, if you want to treat a certain type of pathology or that case, young patients, old patients, your content needs to be curated to sort of recruit that, right? Because there's so much out there now. Putting just anything out there is not the best way to create that practice and that branding.
Great. Any other comments before we go to Joe? Great. Dr. Bood.
Yes, thanks, Hafiz. Great discussion, great presentation, Vani. So I'm going to talk a little bit about using social media to connect with colleagues, and I'll give a couple of vignettes of kind of how that's helped me in my educational practice. So my PowerPoint froze. Let me stop share and reshare. Sorry about that.
You didn't pay the Lebanon Zoom rates.
I knew there was going to be a jab there. Thank you.
It's not a jab. It's unbelievable you're doing this from Lebanon.
All right, here we go. Still froze. Huh. You want to go to the next speaker, Hafiz? I'll figure it out.
Yeah, no problem. Sure. So I'll transition. I can share right now. So if you want to, can you stop sharing for us, please? Yeah, perfect. I can go ahead. All right, can you guys all see that? Perfect, great. So yeah, so I think that was great, Bonnie. So what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about transitioning from social media to your digital base, which is essentially website development. So the whole kind of concept behind this is that we have social media platforms, which we can utilize to connect with patients, with colleagues, as we're going to hear about, how we can use it as a mentorship tool and a leadership tool. But the way I think about your digital presence rather than social media presence is really kind of spokes on a wheel, right? And I would tell you that your website is probably the biggest tool anyone has for curating their digital presence online, and really should be their digital base. And you can utilize spokes on a wheel from digital social platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook around that. And the reason behind it is because a website is probably the biggest source, a repository of information about yourself, about the surgeries you do, about the rehabilitation protocols that you're about to engage with. And it really is the door in which patients can access you. So why is any of this really important, right? Like, why does this digital presence matter? Why are we even having this webinar? Well, I would say that it really comes down to what the service industry really is, right? And I think if you look across the market, there's really three different types of services, right? There are search goods, there are experience goods, and there are credence goods. Search goods are essentially where you, the consumer, has the expertise and ability to evaluate the value of something before they buy it, right? You know if furniture is good before you buy it, you know if clothing is generally good before you buy it, and everyone kind of has that capacity. Experience goods and services are things that everyone has the expertise to evaluate, but you don't know until you go through it, right? So a steak, you want a steak, but you don't really know it's good until you take a bite from it. But everyone knows if it's good or bad. Credence goods are something else, and we are in the credence good profession, which is essentially where people experience something, but they don't really typically have the expertise to understand if what they received was good or not. So for example, you can have surgery with me and you have a shoulder replacement and your pain is better and you can get to 140 and you can externally rotate to 30 and your pain went from a 10 to a 7 or a 5 and you're happy because I'm a nice guy and you think I'm good. But a patient doesn't really know that if they had gone to Mayo Clinic and had it with Dr. Sanchez-Sotelo, they would have gotten to 180 and their pain would have gotten down by 2 points and they would have had an improvement. So what that means is the value of credence goods is based on perception. It's essentially a perception of what you received. And medical care and healthcare and what we are in is essentially very much based on perception. So you can be the best surgeon in the world, but if you can't communicate that and patients can't perceive you that way, it may not matter as much. So really the whole point of this is to curate perception. So how do you get started, right? How do you build a website? How do you do any of this stuff? Well, what we're going to do for this is we're going to talk about how to get started, how to think about website design, right? So the practicalities of user experience, how to beat the algorithm, right? Which is what we all want to know. How do you show up on Google, as Bonnie talked about? So that's search engine optimization. And then how do you leverage certain analytic devices and AI tools to help better improve your digital presence over time? So where to start, right? You want to build a website, you don't have one, you want to start. Well, what are the options? One, hire somebody. That's option A. The problem is you very often have little say in how it's actually run. They're very often boilerplate templates that you could just hire somebody to do. They plug your information into this template because it's easy to do. And it's very hard to change information. You don't hold the keys to your website. So you have to talk to somebody else to get access to change things, which can be problematic. So I would recommend that everyone who wants to do it and has the ability to do it should do it yourself. And it's really not that hard, and I'll explain how. So there's a lot of different website builders that exist. So there's Wix, there's WordPress, there's Squarespace. Your Practice Online is a little bit of a hybrid where you pay someone to do it and you have a little bit more input into that. I personally use Wix. I think anyone can do these. It's really not that hard. But you should always remember that as you try to do this, it's important to hire help when you need it. If you have really big issues with your employer for HIPAA compliance, if you're doing it, it's not working, so you're ranking lower in Google, or it's just really not working for you in attracting the patients or the referral patterns or connecting with people that you want to. So what do website builders look like, right? Well, this is kind of what Wix looks like. It's basically a template format. You can develop certain templates and plug in things as you want. If you can create a PowerPoint, you can create a website. It's very straightforward. And this is really what it looks like. You have different pages, you create pages, you add headings, text boxes, and information to it and curate it how you want it to. So how do you do that, right? How do you arrange things? Well, everything is based on UX or user experience, and you have to design these things with that experience in mind. So what is that based on? Well, we call it website ergonomics, basically how your website or how the digital platform feels as you work through it. Is it clunky? Is it smooth? Is it simple? Is it hard? And how do we do that? Well, we design these things based on things called on psychological principles, as would make sense, right? Visual hierarchy. So you want things that are bigger at the top and move smaller as you go down. You want different colors, size, positioning. You want social proof, right? So having things that have positive reviews or testimonials. So other people telling other people that you're good carries more value than you telling other people that you're good. And you want to have persuasive copywriting, which essentially means compelling headlines, clear calls to actions, and addressing patients' concerns. And if you look at it, this slide is actually based on all of those things, right? We have visual hierarchy, so we have a big title at the top. Our fonts are getting smaller. We have social proof. You have testimonials at the bottom, and you have immediate calls to action. So these are principles that are pretty simple to do and pretty easy to implement. You also want to make sure you reduce visual complexity. Simple is sexy. Think Apple. That's pretty much how they did it. In terms of simplicity is key for making what's attractive. You also want to have consistency. So if you are going to design something a certain way on your website, you want to make sure that there's consistency between the mobile device, so how your website looks like on your phone, and how your website might look like on a desktop. It should also have consistency with what you are in real life. Your digital presence is an extension of your physical presence. And now patients will often interact with your digital self more than they actually interact with your physical self. So what does that look like? So on my website, my book appointment page is quite literally a picture of my lobby. So very often people who feel will go onto my website, they'll book their appointment, and they've seen it before. So then when they walk into the lobby, there's a perception that they already have a sense of familiarity. And it's actually been quite effective. And then there's aesthetics, right? So you got to choose certain things of color schemes and all that stuff. It can be hard, especially if you're not inclined that way. So what did I do? So I essentially looked at my area, which is Newport Beach. I found the most popular mall, country club, and hotel, figured out that they all look the same, and I copied that. These companies spend tens of thousands of dollars on regional market analysts who look at demographics, ages, what appeals to certain areas, and they use it. You don't need to pay the same thing, because very often if you look in your area, high traffic venues will utilize the same thing because they hire the same people. So I essentially took that aesthetic and copied it. So if you have doubts about that, go minimalist. So how to beat Google, right? So now you've figured out how to build a website, you've built it, it looks good. Now how do people see it? So what is search engine optimization? Well, basically Google crawls the internet for new content, right? It searches it. It uses different AI algorithms to read web pages and determine how useful their quality is. And it uses their algorithm, which none of us really know what it is, to index these things based on relevance. So where your website shows up on indexing, i.e. in the ranking on Google, and how you leverage your website to beat that algorithm is essentially what search engine optimization is. So how do we beat it, right? Well, none of us really know because no one has access to that algorithm, but there's a lot of experience out there, right? So there's certain strategies that are pretty effective. One, you need to have keywords. So when you build a website, each web page has to have keywords associated with it. So that's what patients will look for. That's when you put into it a search bar, what you're looking for. That will link to those certain web pages. You want to make sure that they're relevant and effective. You also want to make sure that they don't compete with other things. So for example, my website's newportshoulder.com. Apparently there's something called a Newport shoulder brace, which I didn't know about. So I had to make sure that my website wasn't competing. When people looked for me, it went to some DME website. Accessibility is very important, right? Google's making a push for this. So there's certain things that you can add to a website to make it more accessible for those that are hearing impaired, visually impaired. You want to utilize contrasting colors, appropriate text sizes. The meta structure is important. So what that means is by making text bigger doesn't make it a title. So you typically use these different widgets that are on a website building platform, and you need to click title to make it a title, because the code written in that widget will then reflect as it has a title on Google. You want to drive traffic. Traffic to your website is an indicator of success, right? It's an external validator. So for me, I don't give anybody a physical protocol for physical therapy. Like there's no piece of paper. What they do is they get a link or a QR code to my website because all my physical therapy protocols are on my website. So therefore it drives traffic from patients and from physical therapists. You don't want to let it go stale, so you constantly have to update these things. And backlinks are important. What that means is you want your website to have as many links to it as possible. So if you have a personal website and you have a website, you're listed on a website for your hospital and for your hospital system, you want to make sure that there's a link on each one of those to your website. Again, a sign of external validity. So then now you've built it, people are seeing it. How do you analyze the traffic driving to it? So that's essentially web analytics, right? These are AI tools that are free, very, very often part of these website building platforms that allow you to make informed decisions on what you want to do next. So track and understand, right? It collects traffic and visitor data. It builds programs to help you synthesize that so you can use it. And AI can actually help you understand it. So what does that look like? So for my own website, I found out after about 2 years of having it open, I had a bounce rate of 68%. What that means is people show to the website and then leave. My average pages per session, so people would go to 1.5 pages. They would be there for 4 minutes, and Meet Dr. Kassam was my most clicked thing. So what does that tell me? Well, it tells me that if I track where it is geographically, because you can also track it geographically, it helps me make sure and curate where I'm putting my marketing dollars and marketing efforts. So let's say I know that people are coming to me and I have a 68% bounce rate. Okay, that means my website, my original page is not attractive, but they're spending 4 minutes, meaning that the people who actually stay are actually reading it. So, okay, so I need to make sure that I have my bio is well curated, and you combine that with geographic data to be more relevant to the areas where you're getting traffic from. So these are essentially heat maps that show that, and I can have it relevant to those areas. You can zoom out and you can find out where people are looking at you across the globe, really. And this is actually my country heat map. I don't know why people in Boston were looking at me, but they were. So this is essential. It allows you to curate and kind of generate more higher ROI on your effort and dollars for what you're going to try to market yourself across the country. It allows you to track it over time. So then you know that if I did this push or I bought some ads or I did something on Google, did it actually work? Did it generate traffic? Did it generate people coming to see my website? And it allows you to see which web page they're going to, but also allows you to see how they're getting to you. So this is important because obviously Google is going to be the most influential thing. The direct line, meaning they're actually typing in my website address, but things like Bing is very highly sought after, right? So that was pretty surprising, right? Like who uses Bing? Well, it makes sense, right? Because if you look at what we do, so for example, shoulder arthroplasty, it's a higher age demographic. So people over 65 tend to buy Microsoft more than they buy Apple. And the website browser on Microsoft is Edge, which uses Bing. The benefit of that is that Bing is unsaturated relative to Google. So if you were going to use things like buying ads or putting things out there for yourself, putting ads on Bing about arthroplasty and arthritis may have a higher return than Google because it's less saturated. So in summary for this, I think a website is vital. It is vital regardless of your practice model, whether you are trying in fee for service, trying to generate patients, whether you're an employed model and simply want to have an epicenter of your online brand, because it is what patients will interact with you no matter what. You can use website builders on your own. Again, if you can make a PowerPoint, you can make a website. I promise you, you can save time, you can save money, and it maintains your autonomy. You control what's out there. You want to make sure you prioritize your user experience, and you can utilize free analytics and AI tools to help you improve your direct marketing. So thank you. So there's a lot in there, but so any questions? I mean, Bill, what do you think on that? I mean, you are obviously highly saturated, highly competitive market. You're in New York. I mean, you see younger partners there. What are your thoughts on utilizing these tools?
Well, it does depend on your institution. You know, Columbia actually shuts down personal websites, and it becomes very murky on what you can and can't do. They try not to have too many competing forces. And then I have New York Presbyterian and Columbia, so there's two different parents. So it does depend on your marketplace. There's no question, Hafiz. But assuming you have the approval by wherever you work to do it, then I think your points and practical issues you've brought up are really great. I think people can tell when it looks over polished and over professionalized and doesn't seem genuine. And that may be my own bias because that doesn't feel good to me. But I think when you pay a lot of money for those things, I'm not sure that you're going to get a return. Your ROI, I'm not sure is going to be paid off. And we're going to have to see from Vonnie's AI, bots in the future, whether that we can prove that that's a value added or not.
Joaquin?
That was a great presentation, Hafiz. Two very quick questions. One of them is, you mentioned that the difficult part about having a website is to maintain the content alive, meaning you have to update it. So for younger surgeons listening to you, how do you do that? Do you set up time aside once a month and say, okay, today, Saturday morning, I'm going to spend an hour freshening up this part of the content? Like how do you, because you have to be really disciplined, to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so for me, I mean, I'm in a unique situation where I'm in private practice, but where I'm involved with, because we have a hospital situation and everything. So for me, I assign time, and I have, just like you would a research meeting, I have a marketing meeting. And I have marketing meetings with the hospital, I have marketing meetings with my practice, and I have marketing meetings with my team, which is essentially myself, right? And I set aside time and saying, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do because it's necessary for my business. I would say the easy ways to do that. One, your CV. So if you simply have a link on your website that says your CV, and as you update your CV on your desktop, you just update your CV on your website. So it's an easy way to maintain and refresh things. And the other thing are blogs. So, I mean, blogs kind of went the way of the dodo maybe 10, 15 years ago, but actually on websites, they're very helpful, especially for surgeons. So I think if you get it, if you want the ability to update things and you say, hey, I have this cool idea about, or you have thoughts, think, what Rick Mattson is doing. And if you have your own blog and come up with your own ideas, you can refresh this content and then just constantly upload it. So those are kind of like easier ways to maintain. But I mean, I set it a time because just like you would have a research meeting, I have my.
Hey, Hafiz.
Mhm.
Michael, one of our participants says, awesome talk. Any insight onto how SEO might change with LLMs style search engines?
Sorry, LLM. So as in like AI driven search engines, I'm assuming. Yeah. So I don't think it changes much because I think at the end of the day, most like ChatGPT and essentially all these things just simply crawl the internet. They're just crawling different corners of it. So I don't think much will change. I think what will change is it will give, I think if you ChatGPT, like who's the best shoulder surgeon in New York, right? What it will do is it will essentially read the bios. So I think rather than it all being about the indexing of the actual website, it will be indexing of content. I think that's what will change. So it will depend on the actual content in the website rather than I paid for 100 ads, and that's the one showing up first.
Cool.
All right. Joe?
Yeah, sorry about that. So I'm going to talk about the use of social media to connect with colleagues. So, I'm in my early 50s, and I think we have a wide variety of ages on this call, which is great. You're the youngest, Hafiz, and I think that you've probably adopted this probably the easiest just because it's kind of maybe how you grew up. When I started practice, you really wanted to become a thought leader, and then slowly started realizing that a traditional thought leader is different than what is currently going on as far as influencers and leaders in our world. So, the term influencer has in the past had a negative connotation and maybe still does have somewhat of a negative connotation. And a thought leader is definitely perceived in a different light in a lot of ways. So, perception is, I'm Cristiano Ronaldo, I'm trying to sell shoes and I have, millions of followers versus a thought leader is someone who spent their entire career refining their profession and is revered like Dr. Neer. And I think there's a bit of a melding of those things at this point in 2025. So it's not all that different. And I think you have to be open-minded about it, particularly in people, I would say, in my age group and potentially older. So an influencer in medicine is oftentimes people who use social media and other platforms to share medical information and advice, sometimes to promote medical products or services. And a thought leader is really someone who's viewed as oftentimes very authoritative or influential in the sphere. And so, I think the older thought leaders are oftentimes now becoming or transitioning into influencers. And I think that whether you like it or not, I think that you have to transition into some of that for your professional development. Otherwise, I think you somewhat suffer in the ability to reach people, educate, and also listen to what's going on out there. So, the evolution of technology means we are changing the way we receive and disseminate information. That's just the way the world is, right? But you do have to follow ethical parameters, and obviously, people's ethics can be a little bit of a sliding scale. But I think maintaining a high level of ethical standards in how you post and what you post is very important. Um, you know, if you look at the trend over the last 20 years in developing your footprint, when I first came out, it was research, it was, attending meetings, it was developing your academic rank, community presence, and then evolving over the last 10 years. There's been more privademics, and even though there's been a shift towards more employed models, there's still more of this privademic type feel to things. So, in the last 10 years, people are, more clinically active and also having trainees. It's a popular model. It's one that I've really enjoyed. And the trend in developing your footprint now is that what preceded still holds true. You have to show up, you have to do the research, you have to educate, you have to publish, you have to attend meetings, but also there's this term that's pretty well known these days. Instead of a KOL, you're a DOL, you're a digital opinion leader. And those people can oftentimes affect practice, or really their thoughts can reach a lot of people, and they may or may not be valid, but you have to maintain an ability to listen to what they're saying, make sure what they're saying is being checked, and sometimes call them out if you think that they're not necessarily right. It's an important aspect of your professional presence. And I think, like any good leader, you have to be a good listener. And I think that if you're not listening to what's going on social media, you are going to miss out on what's happening right now, who's talking about what, is somebody saying something that is, heresy, or something really makes sense out there that's going on in social media. So if you're not on social media, you're really not listening. And I think a lot of people pretend like it's nonsense. I know some of my partners that are somewhat older than me think it's just a distraction. It's for fools. But I think the people in their 30s and 40s recognize that it is an important aspect of their professional development, and it is here to stay. So where are colleagues engaging? So we've talked about this: Twitter, LinkedIn, depending on your age group, Instagram, YouTube for educational endeavors, particularly for patients and patient-friendly material. Engaging responsibly, I think that for me, it involves a variety of avenues: sharing papers, promoting education, talking about my colleagues that I've either helped train or who have come visited me, celebrating their achievements. Sometimes directly messaging people to develop further relationships. People reach out to you internationally, nationally. It's much easier now to say, hey, I'm interested in your research, or I'm interested in visiting your institution. Obviously you don't want to violate any of these things. You don't want to involve any politics. You don't want to be seen as someone who's over self-promoting themselves, or obviously post any identifiable patient information. So for me, I really started doing it in full force when I became involved in a meeting that we started 5 years ago, Shoulder 360. It was really a way for me to connect with my colleagues, help promote the educational endeavor, and also I enjoy it for educational value of being able to engage with colleagues from around the world. I don't put anything about my family or personal life in general. I don't really like that. Never discuss things like politics, religion, or controversial issues. So these are my various platforms. LinkedIn is one that I tend to post on, as well as Instagram. And so, you know, I think it's really important to be able to engage locally and nationally and internationally. I don't put on patient education. I think it's a great thing to have if you have the bandwidth for it. Honestly, I just don't have the bandwidth to do that. And I've never hired somebody to do it. I think it's not a bad idea, especially if you have more time or bandwidth to do it in a tasteful fashion. I think it can be very educational. I do have some patients ask me to have more stuff available on electronic media. I have used it a lot to help me interact and build research infrastructure with students. And I'll give you a case study. We started a sort of what we coined as the International Congress of Shoulder and Elbow Research. And we've grown it. At this point, we meet every Saturday. We have somewhere between 20 to 25 students from around the world on it. And it's a fun way to connect, have people come visit you, do research with you. And it's a great way to be involved in research. We have colleagues that are in private institutions that don't have research support that are able to do research together and collaboratively. So it's a grassroots effort that we started through social media. Actually, Hafiz is one of the members. If you're an educator, which I really enjoy, it's an avenue to grow your educational platform. So case study, Shoulder 360. We don't do any print ad. We don't do any wraparounds on journals. We don't do anything in like Orthopedics Today or AOS Now. That costs a lot of money. This is all free stuff, and we have close to 5,000 followers. And so that really helps us in our branding and spreading the word. And it comes in different forms. So we partner with other social media outlets like OrthoBullets and do novel things like Reaction 360 to sort of analyze talks and sort of show the talks in different avenues and venues. It's also a way to keep up with new trends. So for me, best advice is to help you keep up with your new trends. Use your digital footprint is important. I think you don't want to neglect that. For me, my best use of it is for learning, education. I don't really necessarily directly market to patients with it. I'm sure patients look me up on it, but I don't really necessarily market to patient directly. Avoid controversy. So those are my points about social media, particularly for education, interacting with your colleagues. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. So I'm actually I have a question that I'm personally interested in. As part of the title of this webinar was this concept of the credibility paradox. And I'd like to hear from you and everyone kind of on the panel. So John, I mean, if you compare what, you just talked about, what Bonnie talked about. So it's, what Bonnie talked about listed in its top 10 influencers. There becomes a point where the more you engage with the public. So let's say you have 1 million followers. Those aren't 1 million doctors, right? Those are people, general public, not even your patients. At some point, you reach a level of influence with the public where you reach diminishing returns with your colleagues, where people might perceive you as a sellout or not real. And I think a lot of people kind of struggle with that concept if they're trying to go on social media, where at some point you increase your influence with one population, i.e. the public, and you decrease your population, your credibility with your partners. Or you go the other way. If you focus primarily with colleagues, you may never have the bandwidth to grow with the public. So maybe you're stuck at 3,000 followers, 2,000 followers, and you don't have that ability to go each way. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think there is a balance? Do you have to go one way or the other? Or what are your thoughts on people who just want to go with the public, and do you perceive them differently? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very hard balance. I don't think I particularly have it perfected by any means. I think that you have to respect the traditional pathway of being a key opinion leader and the respect that comes with that by doing true research and mentorship and teaching and education, attending conferences. And I think there comes a point where what you're saying people listen to and is important versus just going out there and trying to have 20,000, 30,000 followers and talking about gibberish and when you look up their PubMed index and you find they published 2 papers in 20 years and you're like, okay, what's your credibility? You're talking about a topic that, I'm sorry, have you written a peer-reviewed paper about this in the last 10 years? You're just talking. And at some point, once you're just talking, I don't necessarily take you seriously. You may be entertaining, but I think entertaining and educating can be combined, but you can't necessarily, say you have an expert opinion when you really haven't in my opinion, really vetted that expert opinion by going amongst your peers, getting peer-reviewed papers, presenting on the podium, and being challenged, which is a hard thing. So I think it's a hard balance. I think I do see younger people that are in their first 5 years thinking it's a quick way to climb the ladder and get certain things that they consider quote unquote success that aren't necessarily true wins for them in their long-term career.
Bonnie, what do you think?
I think, maybe on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot of people that have done it incredibly well, right? I think that, there's an ability with social media to connect with patients, but there's also ability to connect with your colleagues and provide respectable and high quality content. And I think, I just think, whenever you post or think about social media, I think you want to think about what would you want to see. And if you're authentic to yourself and in that way, I mean, I think there are many examples I had even on the screen that have done it incredibly well and used it powerfully. Lady Spine spoke at the National Neurosurgery Conference. So, I mean, I think it can be done. I think you just have to make sure that it's truly authentic. And I think what Joe maybe is alluding to is maybe just not going beyond your level of expertise, right? So maybe building your credibility by building your own expertise over time is probably critical.
So Bill and Joaquin, as leaders and maybe more importantly as bosses, what are your thoughts on this? So are there accounts and social media utilization you've seen and you're like, I would never hire this person, or like what is too far for you?
Well, we during COVID, we wrote an article on this because what happened is residency programs started to, feel like they had to market themselves on social media because there was no in-person visits, there were no in-person rotations, interviews were virtual. So all of a sudden, there was an explosion of orthopedic residency programs marketing on social media. And so I noticed some really horrific HIPAA violations, some really horrific kind of moral standard violations. So I just had one of my residents, Elise Bixby, kind of do a purview of all of the orthopedic residency programs. And we found over 50% of them had major concerns defined by some of the things I just mentioned. And so I personally called a couple of my friends and said, do you know this is on your website? Because they had posted something that made it 100% possible for the family member to figure out exactly that their family member had a tibial nail placed by a resident and an intern with no faculty member present, because they boasted about that on social media. So look, I think you've got to be careful. And that's when it was a runaway train, when everybody was rushing to do it. And so I think done tastefully, I think done with respectfully, obviously it's a very powerful tool, but we saw a lot of problems, especially around COVID.
Joaquin, what do you think before we transition to Bill's talk?
Very similar to what Bill was talking about. I think if people are doing it with taste and not lying and not going beyond their expertise, I think it's perfectly fine. If people start, saying things that are not true or violating the basics of being a physician and being a good professional, then I think it's a no-go. But, like this Dr. Rutger Hoffman that we were talking about with Bunny, he now works for New England Journal of Medicine, and he does a very quick summary of papers that people actually listen to and learn the abstract, so it can be very powerful as well. I think it depends on the individual.
Right. Dr. Levine?
All right. Can you see me and hear me, Hafiz?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so social media is a mentorship tool, or be careful what you wish for, is the subtitle for this talk. Here's my disclosure, and you've heard some great talks so far. And, we've been talking about why do you use social media? And really it comes down to this, I think, for everybody here. What are you comfortable sharing? Is it personal? Is it professional? Is it self-promotional? Or is it other promotional? And we have lots of options. And this is a lovely slide that just highlights the different generations and what they're using and what they're comfortable with. You can find it on WordStream if you want to take a look at it, but I think it's nice. And so how do I use it? Well, I use it a lot for mentorship. I use it a lot for departmental promotion. I use it for Zimmer Biomet promotion, since I am a consultant and surgeon designer for that company, and I use it very little for personal. But here are my observations on mentorship. There's a paucity of it in medical school residency for young faculty, and a paucity of sponsorship and allyship beyond mentorship. There's just a thirst for this in our field that is really palpable. And if you're interested in mentorship, then you find out how much of a thirst there is, because people will reach out to you. So this is a guy everybody knows. His name is Tabs Ayer, and I got a cold email from him on February 12th, 2019. And he said, you know what, given your commitment to mentorship, we need an old guy with gray hair. That's not what he said, but that's what he meant. And maybe we could talk about this thing that we're putting together called Ortho Mentor. And I responded to his email. And these were his co-developers, John Kaplan and Matt Veracallo. And they put together this incredible platform to try to help medical students and bring it to scale, because they found so many students were really desiring more opportunities. So we partnered with Ortho Mentor at Columbia Orthopedics, and that led to webinars and JAOS collaboration. And I started Sounds from the Training Room when I was the editor-in-chief at JAOS, and that continues today and now has video kind of blurbs, which I think are really helpful and cover lots of topics. But I just want everybody to remember, this is what we were doing on 3/13/20 at 7 a.m. I had an elective surgery reduction planning with our CEO at New York Presbyterian. And they said, let's perhaps reduce elective surgery by 10%. And then by 4 p.m., we had an emergency meeting with CEO, and we shut down all elective surgery. And this was my operating room on May 6, 2020, where I had operated for 22 years. And those are 3 ICU patients. So that was the real deal. And that led to our webinars as a way to reach out to medical students. And on May 20th, 2020, we had 5,200 people online. We actually shut down Zoom. They had to go to YouTube Live. It was quite remarkable. And our most recent one is going to be next week on September 8th on optimizing advocacy. So again, lots of webinars. And then, this has really changed the whole face of education. And this is really where you have to think about, though. So now, because of my participation in this world, I get these cold call connections all the time. So this is August 6th. Would you be willing to spend some time with me? I have a brother, et cetera, et cetera. On August 4th, Dr. Levine, I'm a 4th-year medical student, profound interest in orthopedics, would be grateful to connect with you, talk about this. And so you have to decide, are you going to actually respond to all of these folks or not? And of course, for me, that's easy because Vonnie knows I don't sleep. And so I'm happy to respond to these connections and try to help these students. July 4th, my name is so-and-so. I'm a 1st-year medical student reaching out to express strong interest. I would love to shadow you. So if you want to get in that space, then there are going to be people who will reach out to you. Now, from a departmental standpoint, this is where I really love social media, talking about promotions, talking about the opening of our spine program, welcoming our new class of residents for Zimmer Biomet, lots of activity in the innovation space with John and the ZB team. And so this has really been a lot of fun. And I really rarely do personal promotions or personal posts, but these are 3: my daughter's wedding, my daughter's medical school graduation, and the passing of my mom. And you'll notice that those are 3 of the most commonly cited or viewed posts. My mom's post on the right had, I think, 170,000 views at some point. So in summary, none of us would be where we are without mentorship, Hafiz. It's a bi-directional process, meaning that if you're going to be involved with mentees, you have to be engaged and the mentee has to be engaged. It's not a unidirectional relationship, and if it is, it will fail. You must invest time and energy if you're going to do this, and social media is a fantastic low-cost pathway for mentorship, but be prepared for lots of activity. And if you're a mentee and you're reaching out to people like Hafiz or like any of the incredible mentors here, be respectful of their time, their space, and their energy, and understand that they may not have the bandwidth to help everybody that's reaching out to them. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thanks, Bill. I mean, I think we've all been pretty, inspired by your work with especially with younger students and med students, especially from a global platform. One of the things that I've been interested in what you've been doing is your willingness to promote your junior partners. And how would you respond to that, to other people on this call who may be hesitant to say, should I be promoting my partner who's also potentially my competition or the guy across the street? And I think you may have a unique perspective on that, because I think it's important, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, that gets to the comfort level. I never liked promoting myself on social media. That again, plenty of our friends do that and do that very well. They do it tastefully and they do that appropriately for them. And I was never comfortable with that. But I was very comfortable, and partly because I'm a department chair now, so it's even easier. But I love supporting everybody in my sphere. And that's not just people in my Columbia sphere. I love promoting Cliff Clifto getting Teacher of the Year at Duke. So for me, it's about having an opportunity to share, sharing positive energy in a world that's so full of negative. You can't turn on anything right now with something horrible. So taking the positive energy that we have and taking those small wins, to me, that's like, there's nothing like it. And I absolutely love doing it.
Awesome. Joaquin?
Thank you very much again for the invitation to participate tonight. So my assigned talk is how to use social media as a leadership tool, which I think is a very interesting turn of how social media can be used. And of course, we all know that leadership can be defined multiple ways. I took this course at Harvard Business School a long time ago about being an authentic leadership using the True North guidelines, and that's what I try to do in anything I'm asked to lead. And it begins by knowing yourself and being aware of who you are and understanding how you are also vulnerable and being humble, of course, and understand what are your core values and those red lines that you will never ever cross. And this is important as it translates into social media. And then after that, it's easy. You want to align people under you to the same goal or goals, at the same time empowering them so that you create value for all stakeholders. And something that Sean O'Driscoll always used to tell me is that you will never be a leader if you have no followers. So a true leader must have people that want to follow you. They choose to align with you because they are really convinced that it's worth to follow you. Social media, we have been talking a lot about what it is, but I think it's worth to think about the elements. So it's a platform, it's a digital element where the users will create their profile. So who is their digital persona? They establish connections so they can be friends with Bill Levine or Joe Abboud or Bunny or John Sperling. And then people create content that can be completely public or semi-public. And then these users interact by tagging others, doing likes and shares and comments and messages. And of course, there is all these hidden algorithms that then distribute content as they wish for different channels. So if you are a leader and you want to use social media, I think it's important to understand that this is a way to amplify your message. And you have to be careful in choosing your channels, creating your profile and connections, understand what is it that you want to release our content and when, and then interact so that your amplification continues further and potentially use analytics. So I think as of today, I would argue that from a leadership perspective, LinkedIn probably is the best platform because it's the most professional, but Instagram is a very good way to reach really large audiences. So for me, I think I don't have time to do every single channel. Those two are the ones that I really like. And like Bunny mentioned, if you have content that is more video-based or podcast, it has to be hosted on YouTube. So that's the advice I would give for people that want to use social media as a leader. Your profile is important. It has to be professional, comprehensive, and updated. So this is my LinkedIn profile, and I made some effort to have a bio that explains who I am, it reflects your activity, and you can actually sequence all these elements the way you want them to be shown. And you don't want to overburden it, but you want to have the ability to show exactly why is it that people may have chosen you as a leader. In terms of content, I believe that it has to be really high quality. So video is probably better than image better than text. And I think it has to be aesthetically pleasing. So you have to think about the camera, the focus, the light, the sound. I use captions. There's a program called Teleprompter that is very easy to use so that I actually can deliver the message I want to deliver. I want to be consistent. And I think as a leader, it's ideal that you always have your logo and you end up with the mission statement of your organization that you're trying to lead. And then select carefully the message, which typically is either inspirational or informational, but always include others as part of the empowering of a true North leader, and end with a call for action. And then for the post to be really amplified, you have to craft carefully the associated text, and then you have to use these connectors, hashtags and tags and links, so that people start to get them in their feeds, and then they may amplify your message more. So this is one of the things that I've been doing, as you know, for ASCS, where I try to create a video that is pretty professional. It has captions because people in elevators or in the street don't want to have the sound on. It has a shoulder and an elbow. There is some family pictures in the background so that I interact as a human being as well, but always empowering other people that are actually doing the work for the corporation or for us, for our society, so that I'm telling what the message is, but then I am also empowering people that are actually doing all the hard work, and then always finish with a call for action. So whatever you're talking about here, at the end you say, okay, so now you're listening to the message. This is what I would like you to do if you want to follow me, so that our society or our company or our hospital continues getting better. So how do you know if you're successful? Then you have to go back to your leadership properties. So are you creating content that respects your values and never ever crosses the red lines? Like Joe was saying, no political stuff, no controversy, and so on. Are you aligning people to the same purpose? Are you empowering them? Do you show them in your social media channels? Are you creating value for all of them? And then are you compelling enough for people to actually follow you? And then on top of that, if you want, you can also use analytics, but I think it's a very good way to amplify your message as a leader. So remember that a true leader must have people that want to follow you. They choose to align with you because they are convinced that you are a good leader. And social media for this and other things is a tool, but not a lifestyle. So you have to use it to amplify your content, but maybe not be on social media all the time as the only way to be a leader. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joaquin. I think, we've all been pretty impressed and inspired with how you're changing the way that the ASCS leadership kind of communicates with its members. So where do you think this should go? So, I mean, you started this concept, but how do you want this to continue for presidents in the future?
I think it's very different for each person. I like social media like you. So for me, even though it takes time, it's not a burden because I enjoy it. But it's just my style to convey to all the members what's going on and to empower others. I'm sure there is many other ways. So I don't think that every future president has to follow this trend. This is just something that I chose to do. But I do think that if you want to send messages to ASCS or to Columbia Presbyterian or to Mayo Clinic, and people are listening to your channels, it's a very effective way to amplify your content.
And Joe, you've kind of done this as well from the foundation side with Shoulder and Elbow Week, right? Really kind of made that explode over the last couple of years, for lack of a better term. So what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that in terms of using it to help promote the foundation and not-for-profit work and charity work?
Yeah. The ASCS side, both on society and the foundation side, we've really expanded our social media presence significantly. We've hired somebody in marketing. We have routine social media posts for the society, for the foundation, for National Shoulder Elbow Week. But I think, a lot of it, the best stuff is organic, right? It's the local community members posting about stuff, getting excited and tagging their friends, et cetera, creating that sort of exponential growth. And so I think, Joaquin and others have gotten buy-in. So people actually, are doing it more. And now all of a sudden you see ASCS everywhere. I can't open up LinkedIn without seeing an ASCS post or Instagram. It reminds me of kind of what's going on in my ASCS community, keeps me connected. And I think that's really important, particularly for younger individuals as they try to get involved. And the ASCS has gotten bigger, so it keeps it more, I would say, intimate in some ways. So that's been a great thing.
Hafiz, I'd also sort of suggest that, as we continue to use it for leadership, for work and all the efforts, we also think about, and one just suggestion I sort of see, like Joaquin's done so well, and is just also bridging to our patients, right? Because I think brand awareness goes not just within our community, but out to the community. And I think sometimes, especially in the interconnected world we are, when people see us doing the work we do, and maybe the efforts we take and the camaraderie we have and the quality of education we provide, you know, I think it just really allows us to expand maybe our audience more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Any other comments from the panel? Dr. Sperling, any thoughts or questions?
What a terrific idea you had, Hafiz, putting this together. I learned a ton tonight, and what a great WebEx this will be for the rest of our members, and it'll be online for others to see as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Thank our panelists for being here. Thanks, Steve, for helping organize. Of course, none of this would happen without you. And again, make sure you spread the word about these webinars, and make sure that you tell all your colleagues about the ASCS link, which is the big push from the educational committee, where a lot of this content will be stored in the future. So thank you all again, and feel free to reach out to any of us should you ever have any questions. Thanks.